here I would like to thank the organizers for their great effort and commitment to organize people from different profiles and different continents, but all of them from Macedonia. I would like to add up to where my colleague Gushevska finished. Through the diplomatic documents, especially Russian ones and Australian ones, to follow up the idea for autonomy and independence in both regions of the Ottoman Empire, Macedonia and Albania, even though as such at their time they didn't figure as such, because the Ottoman Empire administratively and territorially is organized into vilayates, and vilayates are organized into sanjaks, and Macedonia can be recognized in their documents of that time as Bitola. Actually they call it Kosovo vilayet, Thessaloniki vilayet, and Bitola, or maybe Bitola vilayet. Concerning today's paper, I focus on diplomatic documents, and the rest of my work will be presented in the print version of this paper. Today, my title is Macedonian and Albanian Question through Russian and Austrian diplomatic documents. In the fall of 1912, the fast and effective victories of the Allied armies and their occupation of Ottoman territories, Macedonia and Albania, as well as the Bulgarian rapprochement towards Eastern Constantinople, forced the great forces to start mutual consultations in order to solve the issues that came out of this conflict and which directly tackled their interests. The legal basis of these meetings and competencies that great forces had were not directly involved in the provisions of the Berlin Treaty. Until the start of the First Balkan War, they, through Austro-Hungary and Russia, as their mandators, directly intervened in elimination of all crisis moments which would emerge in this region. In consultation around the war conflict in the Balkans, the great forces as main questions had the future of Constantinople, occupied territories by Allied armies, islands of agency. Actually, for them, most interesting was the question of the future of Constantinople, because in case of its occupation by Bulgaria, there was danger of European conflict. The failure of the Bulgarian army at Chatalja determined the fate of Constantinople and preserved European mirror for a short time. The accomplished peace of the great forces about the solution of the dispute, as well as the truce, enabled in London the Ambassadors' Conference 1912, where general European questions were to be solved. Concerning the question of occupied territories of Allied armies in terms of Macedonia, by the end of October 1912, it was clear that these territories, with the exceptions of Albania, will be left to Albanian countries. So what is interesting is that this decision to create Albanian state, ambassadors brought based on people's principle. Later on, as a result of the continuation of the war operations, great forces brought the decision for the future of territories occupied by the Allied armies. With this decision, the whole territory of the European Turkey, from the line Enos Media, that is today Trachea, Macedonia, Epir, was left to the Balkan allies. It is obvious that the great forces during the conference did not stick to consistently to the ethnic principle, which was one of the basic principles of the international law. On the territory of European Turkey, where Albanians, Bulgarians lived, which lived as homogeneous communities at certain territories: Albanians, Bulgarians, Greeks, Serbs, Macedonians. They only, at the first meeting, on the 16th of December 1912, the Austrian ambassador announced that the viewpoint of his government is that Albania can be autonomous and independent, which means big enough to have its own independent existence. He was supported by his Russian colleague. In terms of Albania, the ethnic principle was dominant. The Austrian Minister for Foreign Affairs stated, Skadar will belong to Albania on the principle of ethnicity. As opposed to Albania, and this ambassadors' conference, Macedonia was by the name of all territories without sense for people living in this territory. In this context, the question is imposed whether the decision all territories western from the line Enos Media will be given away by Turkey to the allies, with exception of Albania, will be in accordance to the people's principle. Great forces had in consideration of the people's principle only if it was in accordance to their interests. And this ambassadors' conference was not a regular conference, but a conference about sharing thoughts of certain ambassadors representing their countries, which were supposed to be transferred to the Balkans. At the ambassadors' conference, they didn't distinct Balkan peoples, but they divided territories without having sense for national feelings of these peoples, but took care not to destroy the principle of balance. Great forces of this period and later, during the Second Balkan War, did not want to discuss the Macedonian issue and the status of Macedonia. Their decision, territory of Macedonia, to give away to Balkan allies was opposite to the generally accepted principles of international law. This political decision had the aim to satisfy the interests of the great forces and the Balkan states and to preserve the peace in Europe. 6 years later, 1919, an Irish journalist, James Boucher, in his article of the Macedonian issue, which he published in Manchester Guardian, stated conspirative silence concerning the Macedonian issue at the Paris conference. He said that the territorial issues concerning Macedonia remain the same. They were confirmed as the ones of the Bucharest Treaty 1913. We considered that the silence wouldn't be so conspirative if the issue was the territorial political content of the Macedonian issue. Following the historical vertical, the conspiracy of the great forces concerning the Macedonian issue is of older date and refers to its national, that is, people's content. The source documents confirm that the Macedonian issue since the 50th years of the 19th century started to be expressed as a linguistic, cultural, ethnic issue in the address of the Macedonian internal structures in front of the public government concerning the religious government that is the Constantinople Patriarchy and the Bulgarian Exarchy. In the upcoming period, the Macedonian question intensified as movement with clear thought for independent national and church liberation. This was written in the 60s by Slaveykov, representative of the Constantinople circles of Bulgarian revival, and he thought that the Macedonian issue should not come out in the market, but should be left behind the scene of the inter-ethnic political relations of the Ottoman Empire. Anticipation of Macedonian characteristic was not important to the Ottoman state policy, which organized the territories into vilayets as territorial units. Not a tendency only of the Russians, but of the Bulgarians, but also of the Russians. There are documents where high diplomatic representatives of Russia in there are threatened, are forbidden to use the name Macedonia. So they were forbidden. The Russian representatives in Macedonia and everywhere were forbidden to use the name Macedonia. They were allowed to use the word vilayet, which was a territorial unit organized by the Ottoman Empire. The Sultan himself sends a decree to his representatives where he warns them not to use the name Macedonia, because the Ottoman Empire is organized into vilayets, and they will call the vilayets by their names, or it will be called the 3 Irumen vilayets. The date of today's dispute name issue we have is actually originates from the past. I can say, as advice to Macedonian politicians, they raised historical moments. The Greek and Bulgarian representatives in Constantinople, when they bargain about territories in Macedonia, mixed eparchies in Macedonia as they call them, when one of the side was supposed to give away and there was pressure over the Bulgarian territory, Bulgarians negotiated. So the issue was solved in their interest. Now they have their own autonomous church. There are examples in history, and that is why we learn history, in order to become smarter. The anticipation of Macedonian trades was not important neither for the Ottoman state policy nor for the European forces, Russia nor Austro-Hungary. The political construction Bulgaria, they use it as ethnonym for concrete interests. The 60s of the 19th century, where they really the revival movement starts. Maybe it doesn't have all the traits of a revival movement, but if we compare the Bulgarian, the Serbian movement, maybe our revival movement would be more profilized. And at the time of Miladinovci brothers, the greatest marketing of that political construction, Bulgarians, was made by Austro-Hungary when they see how Russia uses it. And if we ask why we find the word Bulgarian in the collection of the Mildinovci brothers book, that is the influence of the Russians and of Austro-Hungary, the Austrian kingdom at that time. Because we are running out of time, I will shortly synthesize sum up. I wanted to say that Macedonia and Albania and the communities living in that territory developed similarly. This is confirmed by Austrian documents also. Macedonia, if we read documents, has organized a revolutionary movement with its long tradition, no matter where, since 1908. Everybody notices why Albania has no revolutionary movement. But what distinguishes Macedonia from Albania is the great support. They have a good sponsor, and that is Austria. Austria, at the beginning of the conference, 1919, the Austrian minister says to his diplomat, we will do everything just to eliminate foreign presence at the Adriatic coast. And for us, it's best if autonomous Albania exists. That is why Macedonia loses its battle, its fight, because of the political pragmatics of the great forces. If there were interests and pragmatics, even if you're in a worse position, you can gain independence. That is what they were thinking, the people of 1913. I would end here, and we can open a small discussion. Thank you, Kotlar-Trajkova, PhD, for her paper and strategies discussed in her paper before, during, and after Balkan Wars. We can learn from history and try not to repeat mistakes. Allies and unions are created, but they have expiry date almost always. What is more valuable, identity, and what persists is identity. Destiny of humans is strange, and destiny of states is strange. These states, these empires ceased existing after a certain time. The Russian royal family was destroyed, and Austro-Hungary was also destroyed. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
I'm from University of Bucharest, PhD candidate. I have a presentation tomorrow, but I wanted to ask, you mentioned that the Sultan forbade the Russian diplomats from using the name Macedonia. Why is that? I mean, what I mean is, what was the content of the term? What did the term mean at the time? Was it just geographical, or was there already some kind of ethnic or national content to the concept of Macedonia? I'm asking this because in my experience, in the bibliography I've consulted, I found that it was only used as a geographical term for the 19th century. And maybe you found some bibliography that I missed that indicated otherwise.
Благодарам на прашањето. Фактички со
Your question concerns Russian policy, which is defined in the 60s, the end of 50s of the 19th century. If we follow the 50s, Russia follows pan-Slavic, the idea of pan-Slavism. Then this idea is a great mobilizing factor in Serbia, in Bulgaria, and in part of Macedonia. And there are no problems in naming territories, nor in naming people. Following the documentation, I noticed change in Russian policy at the end of 1850s and beginning of 1860s. Hence, it's not by accident that 1861, the first consul comes in Bitola, Russian, and starts to spread in Bulgaria, starts to spread pan-Bulgarian idea. Up to then, this option, is not very present in the Russian policy. I started to analyze some Russian diplomats, and when diplomats themselves discuss among themselves and write about Macedonia, they use the term Macedonia, and even more, they use the term Macedonians in order to name the people who live there, at that territory. For example, Ambassador Arachinsky, who in that communication with his colleagues uses this terminology. The same person, at the same period, when he addresses the people in Macedonia, literally, I will give you the example of the citizens of the town of Kukush. He uses the term Macedono-Bulgarians, Sloveno-Bulgarians, Macedonian Slovene language. So this is very this Russian policy was run by a special foreign policy ministry, and not the commission that was responsible for this. My paper, I intend to quote all Russian diplomats who use the term Macedonia, among them Petraev, the diplomat Petraev, who defines Macedonia politically, not geographically. Also about the name and the language, which they find either as Macedonian or Slavic, similar to other languages, or part of the family group of Russian or Serbian. But at no moment Petraev, Kalnikov, neither of them say that the people who live are Bulgarians, as the Bulgarians they meet in the Balkan states. It's very interesting that when diplomats have orders to give reports, secret reports, they are very sincere, and we find here Macedonians, Macedonian language, Macedonia. But when we speak about diplomatic document which is not secret, then they use the term, the conventional language, they say Bulgarians, but also we can recognize that the term Bulgarians, because one of those consuls explains, refers more to a certain category of citizens who have gained education in Bulgaria or has economic relations with Bulgaria. So they refer more to people, category of people which politically, military, economic relations interests with those of Bulgaria. This is in context of Bulgaria. The same happens with Serbia and Greece. So they are very aware when they have to put accent to the difference, and when they are supposed to keep quiet. Thank you. Are there any further questions?
I feel the need to put a disclaimer when it comes to relativization towards our identity, especially when a diplomatic group here in Macedonia attempted to impose a change of our name. I'm not going to mention one of the ambassadors, which said, okay, but what kind of identity are you talking about? And as previously said, was that identity an Oriental one under the Ottoman, another identity under the Bulgarian slavery, the Serbian slavery? What is your identity? That relativization is not acceptable. Basically, the identity is influenced, yes, but the identity is one and the same and mostly reflected in the language, which expresses the social, cultural atmosphere and environment. There are a lot of things to be said, but we're going to have a very long discussion tomorrow, since a lot of the presentations are scheduled for today, a lot of today's presentation. So I don't know how late are gonna be tomorrow, because it's very, very tiresome. Thank you very much for your attendance. I would like to apologize our guests from Romania, since their presentation were scheduled for tomorrow, but we do whatever we can. Still won over Vardar, so we have to fight back now, so you know.
Later paper, I want to complete that in June 1930, the Prime Minister of Romania, Titu Maiorescu, organized official dinner in Bucharest and asked all the diplomatic ambassadors of great power in Bucharest about the question of autonomous state of Macedonia. And Shebeko, the ambassador of Russia, told him it's impossible to do this state because in future the Bulgaria will annex this state. About the position of Austrian in Romanian source, I will tell tomorrow. This information is in the diary of Titu Maiorescu, published in Romanian language. If you need this information, I can give you next tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the information. Unfortunately, I was unable to elaborate on my text because of time constraints, but my remark, and with Liliana, we analyzed the documents, and the question of autonomy, if it comes from Bulgarian or a Russian side, is more of a tactical maneuver than a specific or truthful act. It's kind of a transition stage. We read the diplomatic reading between the lines. We have the impression, if I'm being unprofessional and talking about only as a Macedonian one, that the Russian politics is quite bears fault for the occurrences. As a historian, I would formulate it differently. I wouldn't say Russia is guilty.